and welcome to Intimacy Coordination for the Scene, how choreographing scenes of intimacy leads to better safety and storytelling. This session is kindly sponsored by our Platinum sponsored IATC 891. My name is Natalie Diaz, and I am the safety advisor for motion picture at Actsafe Safety Association. We first ask that everyone please mute themselves in remote before the session starts. Before we start this session, I would like to first acknowledge the traditional indigenous lands that we all live and gather on today. Although this meeting is online, we still enjoy the pleasure of living within an indigenous territory. To highlight the importance of this acknowledgement, I would like to urge you, following this session, to visit the Native Land digital website and search the territory on which you are located. That website is www.native-land.ca. The session today is presented by Samantha Jeffrey and Siobhan Richardson, and is moderated by Siobhan. Both of our presenters are members of the National Safety of Intimacy Professionals, and it is a non-profit organization. Members of the NSIP have been working across Canada and internationally as intimacy professionals since before the role of intimacy director and coordinator has become well known in the industry. This group is passionate about bringing this craft to the industry through an artistic, professional, and inclusive lens. If you have any questions that you'd like me to ask our presenters during question time, please write them into the chat, into the Q&A, section at the bottom of your screens, and not in the chat box, please. Before we begin, our presenters would like to know their audience. A poll is on the screen, and we ask that you take a moment and answer these three questions, please. What side of the industry are you from? What position you usually hold? And have you used an intimacy coordinator or director before? Thank you all. Without any delay, let me welcome your moderator for this session, Siobhan. Over to you.
Hi, folks. Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for being here today. We are very excited to offer you this information and to introduce you perhaps to this role, but in addition to perhaps give you a little bit more information than you had before on it. I'd like to introduce my co-host, my cohort, as it were, Sam Jeffrey. And Sam, would you like to introduce yourself a little?
Yeah, thanks, Siobhan. My name is Sam Jeffrey. I'm currently speaking to you from the Misconceptions on Treaty 6 territory. Treaty 7 is down south. And I am an intimacy coordinator as well as an intimacy director. And I also come to the industry from the side of acting, producing, and fight directing as well. And yeah, have been working on NSIP since the beginning with Siobhan, as well as all the other lovely people that you saw on the slide.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I forgot to mention that part too. I'm an actor, fighter, singer, dancer. I'm a fight director and instructor, and I'm an intimacy director, coordinator, and educator. So like for myself, my view on this is always informed by what do I need as an actor, and then as a creative partner, I like to make sure that everyone has the information they need to succeed in this. So without further ado, let us, this is always a fun part for me where I'm like, is this going to do what I expect it to do? Hooray, I hope you can see the things you're supposed to see.
I can see the slide.
You can see it?
Looks
Great.
correct.
Awesome. Great, so you'll see here, This is a session about intimacy coordination for the screen and how choreographing scenes of intimacy leads to better safety and storytelling. Some of the misconceptions out there is that choreographing intimacy somehow is detrimental to the craft. But part of our aim is to show you how it positively affects the work that we do. You'll see here is a list of folks who helped to collaborate on the creation of this presentation, and their names will be repeated at the bottom as well. Because some of the information that we are approaching in this particular presentation can be challenging or may bring up some experiences that you've had before, please notice here some mental health resources. The slide deck is available to you, but just in case you need this today, please feel free to screen capture what you are seeing in front of you in case you have a need to take a look at this information during the presentation, or if you need to reach out to somebody, please feel free to do that now or at any time. All right, so full disclosure, Sam and I had expected 3 other colleagues. They are all on set today. So we are figuring this out live in front of you. So there may be times that I ask Sam, would you like to contribute to this? Or Sam may be like, I have a thing to say. So just so you know, this will be slightly less smooth than maybe it has been in other presentations. So thank you so much for your kindness and generosity as we make our way through this.
We roll with the punches. That's the industry, right?
That's what we do. That really is what we do. So continuing on our content awareness, the conversation will touch upon sensitive subject matter, including discussions of trauma and trauma-related illness. But let's start with, what is intimacy? So often when we think of it in a work context, we're thinking about sex scenes, maybe we're thinking about kissing, but pretty much everyone thinks about sex. But part of what we want to mention is that it's actually quite a broad definition. When it comes to intimacy direction and coordination, where your intimacy director and coordinator can support you is in all sorts of scenes where there is, and here's a broad definition, vulnerability, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, anything where your performer or your crew, anyone on the project, might benefit from additional support. And so as part of that, we want to create a little bit of a sense of context for you. So intimacy is a broad term, kind of like violence is a rather broad term. And when we see it in a script, we'll see they fight. And they fight actually needs a whole bunch more information. They fight might be slap, slap, punch. It might be a minute and a half of sword fighting to music. And some of the questions we need to ask are various and many. So then when we apply this to intimacy, these are maybe some of the same questions we need to be asking. So here are some of the questions we might ask. Sam, do you have anything else to add to like the breadth of questions we need to ask and aspects that we might need to approach when we're speaking of they have sex?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I love the questions that are down here. I feel like they're the thing that gets so often brushed over, just like they fight, they have sex. Do we see it? Do we not see it? You know, everything that we see here. So why have they done it before? What kind is it? Is it sweet? You know, is it rough and exciting? What does it play in? Like, how does it play into the story? Why is it there in the script? Because when these things happen in the script, it's usually, you know, a fight or a sex scene. They're there because there's some kind of, pardon the pun, climactic moment. So there's a lot more going on than just that one little stage direction, which is great for shorthand and great for creativity in terms of allowing people to interpret it however they see fits the story best. But in terms of practice, it doesn't provide a lot in terms of how we need to prepare for it.
Right. And that's the big part of it, right? Like as an intimacy coordinator, as an intimacy director, a lot of our work is to support all of that preparatory action so that on the day, we're all able to move slowly, not slowly, but move mindfully through the work, get the shots that we're looking for. Everyone is relatively happy. It may be a challenging day on some days. Let's say it's violent intimacy. But by the end of the day, we know we're going to get the work because we hired a professional. You hired someone, you brought someone onto the team that has experienced this with this work, not only with the content, but with what people need during that. So we have some examples now of various stage directions. And just think for yourself, if you had to like shoot this tomorrow, would you have the skill to just stage it? They embrace. They grab one another. Well, what does that mean? The act begins.
Which act?
Which act? They make out. Yeah. Is it sloppy? Is it lazy? They consume each other. Well, that's kind of fun. We've got a little bit more of a sense of the tone of that. We've got a little bit more detail, but it doesn't address anything about what those individual characters are really doing. They rip each other's clothes off. Oh, that can hurt if you do it wrong. Just saying.
Yeah, I love and with that rip their clothes off. I love that it's just like, are we talking metaphorical or like does costumes have something to worry about?
Right, the additional liaising that's required when we're looking at that kind of detail. But they get it all. All right, good. Again, it does give us a sense of tone, but as far as like, let's shoot this right now, has someone coordinated all those details? That's great. A group of people in various positions. These are all real, by the way. These are like copied from scripts and put into here. Sam, do you have any other ones that are like your favorite?
Oh, wow. Probably like, it's a dark room. You can kind of tell what they're doing. It's like, what are they doing? No.
You can kind of tell. I enjoy that. I'm seeing if I can find it really quickly. One of my favorites is from Trout Stanley, where they have this wonderful, the writer has put in this wonderful metaphorical language of like, nearby ships crash into the shore. Like it's this enormous poetic language, which really gives us a sense of what's happening inside these people, but nothing specific as to what those performers will be doing. And for anyone else involved in that production, Sam, you put it really well. Like, what are the other logistics? Is wardrobe part of this? Do we have some props in the background? Like, are we showing these metaphors in a literal sense? So that's really the big question. As an intimacy coordinator, we're there to help you with this, because who is responsible for navigating all this? There are evocative words, a really clear sense of what's happening, but who translates that for the production? Who connects the actions of the script, the director's vision, and the actor's boundaries? So let's tell you a little bit more about us. Sam, how do you feel about taking it away for a little bit?
Great. Yeah. So what is an intimacy coordinator and director? Sure, it's becoming a bit more prominent in the industry, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've worked with one before or know exactly what it means. So don't worry, we're here to dispel the myth. Intimacy directors, because it has that word director in it, we work in theater. Turns out in film, when we say director, we mean a very different thing. So just like we have stunt coordinators, in film, we have intimacy coordinators, which better describes the breadth of our work on the film set. And for that, it's for film, it's for television, and we also use intimacy coordinator for motion and performance capture. So anything video game related, green screen, all that lovely stuff.
And
the
in
job
addition,
itself,
like intimacy director is not just for theater; it's also opera, dance, circus. Essentially, you can kind of divide them into like live performance and recorded media.
100%.
Especially in Canada. Yeah, different countries have slightly different language, but in Canada, this is kind of what we have set up already. So why shake the tree in ways we don't have to?
Yeah, and the job
we have a lot of other shaking to do.
All the shaking, bedposts, all the things. So for the difference between intimacy directors and intimacy coordinators, while the industries can be pretty different, the core of the work still remains the same. So in both theater and film, we remain specialized movement choreographers, helping make those choreographic moments look as real or as stylized as we want them to. We can help be acting coaches for those scenes and moments of intimacy, helping bring life to it, or helping with anything that those actors need more support with or asking more support with. We're a resource for intimacy related research, helping dramaturge those things. If you want to know what was going on in the 1500s, we will research the hell out of that. Like we'll go down those roads with you.
That's why we get really nerdy about this stuff, right? Like that's like our home nerdery.
Yeah. I remember hearing a ton about I'm gonna butcher it, but Bridgerton, where they looked at how big the beds were and how you could roll over on those things. They had to look it up because the beds were really small. So we can help with that. We're actors advocates. We're there to help support actors when they feel like they need help having an extra voice in the room because they're in an especially vulnerable moment. We also act as a liaison between production and performers. You know, sometimes, especially in film, the actors, they're in hair and makeup, you know, they're in their trailer. They don't have time to run around and talk to everyone that needs to be talked to. So we can help be that liaison for them. And then finally, that administrative support and tracking. We are spreadsheet nerds. We will track everything. We will make those written documents. It's going to be all written down and nice and neat.
And Sam, how much of your time, like especially in coordination, how much of your time would you say is doing paperwork?
Most of it.
Yeah, like
maybe not most of it, but a lot. There's a lot. It's a lot.
Oh, I would agree it's most of it. I'd say like 80 to 90%, honestly. And then the time you're actually on set, a small amount of that is choreographing, but a lot of it is like making sure that the protocols that have been set up are being retained, that writers are being complied to, that everyone feels supported, everyone feels really clear about what's coming. I think for me, and from what I've heard from a lot of people, that's the big revolution with intimacy coordinating, is that someone has an eye on all of these details that kind of web throughout all sorts of different departments. It's actually quite remarkable how many different touch points, oh goodness, if you'll pardon that phrase, an intimacy coordinator will have with all the various business and artistic conversations that you're having with regard to helping this project to achieve everything that it needs with this particular department.
Definitely.
Yeah. And you mentioned already before, but I want to reiterate. So we use the terms intimacy director and intimacy coordinator to help us parallel with the terms fight director and stunt coordinator, because if they're really similar in a lot of ways. Like I've heard it said that the neurons for fighting and sex are right beside each other in the most instinctive part of your brain. So in all sorts of ways, those, yeah, the lizard brain, like in all sorts of ways, those the performer's experience of those emotions can be similarly deep and primal, while at the same time needing to retain all the detail of like, I'm a person in a room that is fake while you're doing that. So we talked a little bit about how extensive the job of an intimacy coordinator and director can be. We mentioned the dramaturgy, but do you want to talk a little bit more about like some of the detail? Like some of it's mentioned on this slide, but I think we can afford a little bit of time to go into a little bit more of the day-to-day. So there's like administrative and artistic things, but what else might you want to mention?
Yeah, so like we were saying with the dramaturging, but also making sure that consent is existing and documented between all performers who are performing in, or the key thing I think is also subjected to the scene. So, you know, there's tons of crew often, whether it's a closed set or not. There's going to be other people there, other people on the monitors who are watching the action too, and making sure that they know what's happening, what's coming up, and that they're okay with being there too, because consent is about everyone, not just the performers. So making sure that that's there, you know, making sure makeup knows exactly what they are helping with, and often costumes are the ones spearheading a lot of these things. So making sure that they're good to be there too, and they're happy and consenting to everything there.
That's a good point. Do you mind if we pause on that for a second?
Yeah,
because I think before intimacy coordinators, a lot of people don't realize how much of this work was like the mental health first aid part of it and the care of actors, how much of that was being done by wardrobe. Because it's an opportunity for privacy. There are a lot of wardrobe people who have approached intimacy people and said, like, thank you, there is part of this job that has been challenging to sustain. And in the same breath, like wardrobe folks, we're not looking to take away anything from your work. We're definitely here to support you. And we might have, depending on the size of the project, your intimacy coordinator might have some specialized items, and they might have some specialized knowledge. If you haven't had an opportunity to work with things like modesty garments before, your intimacy coordinator can support you in either sourcing them or creating them and the various details and such that are needed for that. I'm fascinated by modesty garments. It's so cool.
Amazing. And then, so I mean, there's so many different aspects of this job, but in addition, so going back, it's, offering that advice and best practices for process, acknowledging those power dynamics that exist in the room and how they can kind of warp boundaries and consent. So, offering an interruption of that, making sure that when people are agreeing to things, they're agreeing because that's what they want to do and what they think is best for their process and their actor and the scene, rather than just, saying yes because they believe it's what's expected of them, because you can always see that in their eyes on camera, when they really didn't wish they would be there. We're also mental health first aid trained, like Siobhan mentioned. We're people that can be not the psychologist on set, certainly, but the people that can help connect people with resources. And often we'll get disclosures on set, or people just asking where they can find more information, and we're trained to do that and trained to help connect people to the resources that they might need. Like she mentioned, coordinating with wardrobe, hair, makeup. Often they'll know a lot of these things already, and we can help be that liaison between, like, hey, did you know that you might need this for this scene? Maybe they haven't heard that there's been a script change already, and making sure that they're really up to date and that they're going to be prepared on the day and feel like they have everything that they need in those departments. And then again, assisting with that communication, and then bringing in those different specialties and expertise that some of us have. So Siobhan's amazing fight direction background, maybe you have a sword fight that's in lingerie, hire Siobhan. Bringing in those extra little details. Some of us have sexuality education backgrounds. Some of us have different kink awareness. All of these different categories. There's generally an intimacy coordinator out there who might be able to help you out, or at least knows someone who we can consult with.
Yeah, I think, and to me, that's one of the big things too, is that it's some of those like research avenues that we have more access, not necessarily more access to, but more awareness of the most ethical ways, or more ethical ways to access them than maybe people were aware of before. It's a big part of it. So in summary, your intimacy professional is an artistic role, it's a support role, and focuses on the sustainability. And what we mean by that has to do with mental and physical health, because of course your mental health will affect your physical health. If it's a particularly athletic scene, certainly like literal physical health is part of that. But we also mean the sustainability of like the emotional output that goes into it. Sometimes the scene is challenging. Sometimes the scene is simply intense and they're long days. So your intimacy coordinator can help support the actors and everyone involved in that. But our goal together is to achieve clear storytelling. So we're supporting the telling of the story. We want to make a good product, as it were, and we want to make sure that we're all happy, healthy, and safe by the end of the day, by the end of the project, that we're all like excited to go to the next one. Yeah. In case you haven't heard of it yet, ACTRA has a best practices document. We do absolutely recommend taking a look at that. And some of the content we will introduce you to. Sam, do you feel like reading some headings?
Yeah, so these are parts of the best practice document. They're the headings in there. Working with an IC, intimacy coordinator, there's sections on pre-production, on auditions, on contracts. So that would include, riders, nudity riders, all those kinds of things as well. Rehearsals, wardrobe and makeup, performance and closed sets. So actual guidelines around that, as well as editing and process. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm actually quite surprised at how many people aren't clear about what a closed set protocol actually is.
Yes.
And especially in relation to intimacy, like, sure, a production can definitely have their own protocols for a closed set, but when it comes to intimacy, there are some like ideas running through it that should be consistent, or at least a common baseline.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes it gets missed because when you're watching on a monitor, it doesn't have the same urgency of being like, oh, maybe this isn't something, this is a closed set, because you're watching on a monitor. It doesn't feel like you're there. It doesn't necessarily feel like a violation of those boundaries. So sometimes I think productions, we just don't think about it.
Yeah.
So having those clear guidelines, I think is really, really nice for especially those larger sets where it's like, so who actually does need to be on monitors? Because definitely some people do. And then additionally, right in the same vein, editing and post-production, I think, again, something that has been missed before, like what responsibilities do we have around editing and post-production of these scenes? And then working with minors, which is a big one as well. Absolutely. Anything to do with minors, whether it's implied nudity, implied sexual content, or just working with minors in scenes where other things are happening nearby or around them.
Yeah. And lots of, I guess you could say, moral obligations, but also extensive legal obligations.
Yes.
So the departments that intimacy coordinators are working alongside, we've mentioned this idea, but they really interweave. They are a beacon point for information from a number of different departments. So the EPs, the director, assistant direction, wardrobe, hair, makeup, sets, stunts, and then of course, like, depends on the needs of the production. So let's say that the piece has people slamming each other into walls, then set is going to need to be part of that conversation. And then stunt, of course, if it's violent intimacy, or again, if people are like slamming each other into walls during sex, there are times that a stunt coordinator will be necessary, if not recommended, definitely in other cases, absolutely necessary to ensure that actors are not being injured and that they have the protective gear that they need in order to survive to the end of the day.
Definitely. As an intimacy coordinator, I worked alongside stunt coordinators almost as often as I don't. I don't know what that says about the scenes I'm working on, but yeah.
Very thrilling. And also, I think it just said something about the nature of some of the sex that we like to capture, is that there's sometimes there's an athleticism, sometimes there is a exploring the darker side, whether it be consensual or non-consensual. There's a lot of stories that we actually open to when we have this kind of mindfulness, because we know that we can have the open conversations. That's one of the positive feedback that I've gotten. Some of the positive feedback I've gotten from people I've worked with is they're just so grateful for the ability to have these conversations. Because for some people, it's been really challenging. They've wanted to tell certain stories, but they have been aware of their power dynamic and they don't want to feel like they're coercing somebody, or they have wanted to have conversations about these scenes, but they haven't felt like they have the space or they have the power in the space to have those conversations. And it's always stunning, the kind of work that develops when you're able to have these open conversations and the happiness of the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, do you want to tell us a little bit about like when we would like to have an intimacy coordinator?
Yeah, so when do we use an IC? You may be asking yourself, is it all the time? The answer is not all the time, but there are a lot of scenarios in which it can definitely be helpful and useful. So first off, the really obvious one, anytime there's nudity or partial nudity, you're going to need a nudity rider. There's things going on. There's garments that are going to be required. It's something we can help with. Consensual sex between two or more people, again, I think these are the kind of scenarios. So non-consensual sex between two or more people, also known as an assault scene, mirroring the language of whoever is in the scene themselves, those actors and those directors of those scenes. And then also any consensual, non-consensual sexual acts, not just penetrative sex. So we might be looking at oral sex, manual stimulation, intimate touching, sexual violence, both consensual and non-consensual. Maybe it's a kink scene. Maybe it's an assault scene. Those are the kinds of scenes that people think of when they think of intimacy coordinators. They're like, oh yeah, the sex scenes, the scene.
Oh, is anyone else getting lag?
It might just be me.
Nope, there she is. She's back.
Okay, good.
Apologies, I just got a notification on my computer that my internet connection is unstable.
Oh dear, that is good to know.
But yeah, so Siobhan, do you want to pick up where I cut out?
Sure. We were just at sexual violence, self-stimulation. So we said previously consensual sex with two or more people. You can also have consensual sex with one person. Now, kissing, it's interesting. Kissing is interesting to me because a lot of people go, oh, it's just a kiss or it's a simple kiss. But interestingly enough, when you have two people who have potentially never met now needing to kiss each other, it's not a simple kiss. You don't know that person's background. Maybe they haven't kissed somebody before. We can't actually assume what somebody's done. There's also other parts of kissing, not only lips touching, but where are hands going? What are the circumstances around that kiss? What are the that has to do with who is around and what's the context of the scene. How are these characters being portrayed? So kissing is one that a lot of people don't think of. But again, some of the positive feedback we've gotten is just how much more interesting the scene was and how much more story it told because they spent some time with a coordinator to work on all those various moments.
And on the split side of that, sometimes the kissing scene is important because it's those actors asking for the extra support there. There are some actors out there that have really strong boundaries, and for them, doing a really intense kissing scene would be the equivalent of another actor agreeing to do a sex scene. And they just want that extra support because it's not something that they normally do, and they want the extra help. And that's 100% something we can be there for.
We mentioned before all the rules around working with minors, so any intimacy with youth. And that includes, remember we said intimacy is not just sex and kissing, that includes like embraces. Let's say you've got a 10-year-old actor and a 40-year-old actor, and they need to touch each other as though it's parent and child. So you have this 10-year-old hugging a 40-year-old, and they met 20 minutes ago. So that's where your intimacy coordinator can assist with those conversations, mitigating any power dynamics, making sure everyone is confident with what story is being told and how we're physically expressing that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about this final point? I think it's, again, one that can be surprising for some people, both that it's a category and also just how effective it is to have a coordinator on hand for that.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So the last point being scenes of or that demand a heightened state of emotion from the performers. So that might be trauma or hysteria that might put that performer at risk. And when we're looking at that, we're looking at those scenes that could be anything from just emotional response of an actor to anything from a really intense event to just like that actor might just have a meltdown. And when we're looking at that, we're looking at actors who are portraying something that when they're going to that place during performance, their brain no longer is capable of telling that it's fake. And this is something that's been scientifically documented is when actors go to those places, their body doesn't know how to tell that that's not actually happening to them. So making sure that we're being considerate that those performers have the support they need, both in preparation and in debriefing after the scene. If they want any kind of like counseling or support, making sure that they have access to that, making sure that they have any extra space that they may need, or vice versa, any extra support that they may need. And just, assuring, yeah.
I was saying that includes even like just liaising with ADs to say, we know that the actor is going to need 15 minutes here, or the actor is going to need a half hour after this one. And that affects scheduling, which means that on the day you're not waiting for someone unexpectedly, you're able to either like change the order of how things are shot or change when things occur in the day in order to fully support the actor and be able to reach the depths that you're looking for.
Yeah. And when we're looking at performers, especially around any scenes of trauma or hysteria, we never know those performers' backgrounds. We know that statistically, there are a lot of people out there who have had traumatic experiences, and we want to come in with a trauma-informed approach where, people don't have to disclose their trauma to us, but we're going to act in a way that would support anyone with a prior experience that might be brought up by something that they're performing, and support them in doing their career through whatever has happened.
And I want to mention the idea of intersectionality with this too. Like there is and supporting all people with this. We all come in with our own biases, and that's part of what a mindful intimacy coordinator does, is to do some unconscious bias training and examination to make sure that they're fully supporting any person that they might come in contact with during the work process. One thing I wanted to highlight in particular is that we so often think of, in a victim-aggressor relationship of characters, we're often most concerned about the victim character or the actor playing that role. We sometimes forget about the actor playing the role of aggressor. There's a misconception out there that those roles are somehow easier. They aren't. They are still challenging. So that's part of what your intimacy coordinator has, is a slightly different perspective as they specifically relate to these scenes. We're going to fly through the next couple of slides just to be sure that we get to some of the information towards the end of this presentation. We've already covered a little bit of this information, that your intimacy coordinator assists with the scene itself, but also with the surrounding scheduling. If your company or your project is not sure about their intimacy related protocols or their respectful workplaces protocols, your intimacy coordinator can often have insights. An individual might have specific consultation in that field, or they may be able to simply point you in the direction of some resources. Especially at this time, intimacy coordinators can be really helpful with creative blocking, so that we can get the story that we're looking for, but we can be mindful of proximity. And that's at any other time as well. Sometimes we might use masked kisses, as in they're not actually kissing, there's space between them. So we can do kiss masking. We can do alternate choreography that tells the story, or alternate shots that tell the story without needing to expose the actors in a way that is not within their allowed boundaries, within what they have agreed to. There's lots of ways to work around that. And again, especially now, intimacy coordinators are adding risk assessments to their breakdowns to further support the COVID-19 team in mitigating circumstances that might lead to too much connection, or to a situation that could later be unhealthy. There's a number of misconceptions about intimacy coordinators. Feel free to read this list, but I thought maybe, Sam, do you have like a favorite? You have a favorite intimacy coordinator misconception?
My favorite is, it's simple, anyone can do it. Which I always think is hilarious. It's like the equivalent of if the stunt coordinator walked on set and you're like, it's simple, I can just say, hey, go jump out the window. Like,
you can.
You could just say that. But it would probably be pretty dangerous. Yeah.
Probably.
So I think that's my favorite.
That's a great one. And I think people, again, like, forget that a psychological circumstances can be as challenging for someone as like jumping off the high board.
Yeah.
I think my favorite is that we're micromanagers. I think people, when they start to hear about the job and they hear about choreographing intimacy, they worry about it being inorganic, and that it won't look real, it won't be hot. Like my response to that always is, well, like the text never feels real the first time you say it, and yet somehow we manage to say the words as though we're speaking them for the first time. It's a similar process. And of course, Sam and I both have fight specialties. We know through our fight work that the first time you do it is so often awkward. Dancers, every once in a while, the first time you do something after a certain, like at any point, can be kind of awkward, and eventually it becomes so easy and free and expressive. So I like to remind people that they're actually a similar process, and just because we improvise most of it before doesn't make it a more organic process.
Mm-hmm. And on that point, like we work with processes and meet people where they are. So we're not going to come and dictate, this is the way I've always choreographed, so this is how we're doing it now. I've had directors who want like a play-by-play, like breath in, move this, breath out, down, like very, very strict. I've had directors who are like, I normally improv this, and can we figure something out that feels like that? And that's our job, to come in and work with people and performers and directors where they're at and support their process, not impose ours.
Yeah, that's something that I've always strived for myself. Early on, I got some really good advice on how to be a collaborative creative. And so I see what I do is like translating your impulses, director, actor, script, translating them into a version of movement. And then we can do some physical dramaturgy on that to make sure that it really suits the impulses that you're looking for. There are some things that have been unhelpful in the past. So speaking of anybody can do it, sometimes when just anybody does it, we get vague direction like, just go for it, or it's not hot enough, make it hotter. I mean, the sexy is subjective, by the way. So if you tell somebody, make it hotter, then they're like, I am being hot. What are you talking about? That could be what's happening. Or you've got an actor who's being, right? You've got an actor who's being vulnerable. They're like, oh, I've totally been that actor. where they're like, okay, and then flirt with them. I'm like, oh, I thought I was.
Oh, I thought I was.
Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no.
Yeah.
I don't want to know.
And then you got an actor who's just in their head from then on. They're just like, do I not know how to flirt? What's wrong with me? You don't want that.
And you get really self-conscious, and then it doesn't have that organic freedom that you're looking for. Oh, you have something organic, but it's not what you were aiming for.
And then we get into the directions that are like the things that I think at this point make us all cringe a bit. You know, just grab her like this, or you know, just do what you normally do. Grab her ass. I think we can. It's starting to get to the point. I think and I hope where we're all starting to see why that's maybe inappropriate for a workplace. You know, make love to them like what you would your partner. No one wants to see that. That's your personal life. That should remain in your personal life. You know, and go over there and figure it out.
Sex for performance, like the performative storytelling act that denotes sex is happening, or that sexual activity or lovemaking is happening, is really different than doing it in for your own pleasure in your own environment. What feels really great, like, may not read for the camera. So I think that's another sort of leap that some people aren't as aware of, is that what feels organic or what I would do in my private life isn't necessarily going to translate for the camera at all.
Yeah, and that's one of the other main problems we have too, is when actors have been in that kind of, you know, just do it the way you normally would at home. And that's when they start to be unable to differentiate between actor and character. You know, they want to feel it. They're saying, it's not what I would do. They're saying it doesn't feel hot anymore, you know, because we're repeating it. Like, maybe I need to change something so that it's sexy again. And that's, you know, they're unable to differentiate, because that's what's been reinforced time and time again at work, is that you're supposed to make it real. But that's not what we're doing in film.
Exactly. And we're not saying that those actors are bad actors or bad people. And we're just saying that we know now that there are psychological processes that support us in doing great work. And one of them is a mindful separation of your work relationship. Like, we are two artists creating a thing together, and the character to character relationship is another relationship. And then our social interaction is also outside of that, so that we actually can have better mindfulness as to what relationship are we in and under which context.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, of course, we get those extreme examples of sexual assault, the threats to reputation, you know, you'll never work in this industry again. And I think there's been enough in the media that we can all imagine what those examples are.
Yeah. One thing we wanted to mention is this idea of consent as opposed to permission. So consent is something that the people in the situation agree to. So if Sam and I are performing a scene, someone else, our director, can offer hug each other. And then we get a moment to look at each other and say, does that work for you? That works for me. Okay, what are the specifics of how we will touch each other? Great, so we can work through that consent process. Our director can facilitate that process, but our director or our choreographer, whoever happens to be in the room in a position of leadership for that, isn't in the position in a mindful rehearsal of saying, do this, and then the people performing just do it. It's a little bit more of a conversation now. This is one of those things where people go, oh, it's really clunky, it's going to take too long. But I guarantee you, and it happens every time, when we have these front-loaded conversations, the work that comes after goes faster and is clearer and is better performed, because everyone knows what playground are we playing on, what game are we playing. We actually have a common vocabulary as to what we're doing and how we're doing it. Mm-hmm. Which leads us to the idea we're reducing trauma on set. Sam, do you have anything you want to tangent off of in this vein?
Yeah. So I think something that is so important, which is the first 2 points here, is that open communication. So making sure that actors can speak freely, you know, get that support they need between themselves and anyone else on set if they need to. having those open conversations about making something sustainable, about performing trauma in a way that makes your acting career continue after having performed that scene. It's not the kind of scene that you're like, okay, I'm never filming anything ever again because that was horrible. You want these actors to be able to continue, and you want the rest of the people on the set too, to continue their careers and to grow them and build them, and not be like, that was awful, I hate this industry. That's the opposite of what we want. We want people to enjoy their work and continue with it.
And we really have lost so many performers to that, performers of all kinds, to performers and people in our workplace. Not just performers, but people on crew, people in production. There have been so many people who have been so affected by the work that they're putting it down, and we've unfortunately had a bit of a brain drain that way. And so one of the exciting things, like one of the best compliments we get, I think, is when people say, this was the best day, this is the best time I ever had doing this kind of work, or I felt really supported, I felt safe, I felt like I could take big risks, I felt like I could do things I'd never done before because we'd had conversations about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and through that, making sure that those people with mental health first aid are there. That's your intimacy coordinator, and probably other people on set too. Making sure that those resources are available and people know where to find them. It doesn't help to have a resource if no one can find it. And then finally, reasonable scheduling to allow for decompression. Making sure that people have a moment after a really intense scene to do whatever that performer or that person needs to do. Just to close that out and be able to move on with the rest of the day. Taking a minute to finish something completely is going to save more time than having that person thinking about stuff through the rest of the setups for the rest of the day.
Yeah, if you haven't read Burnout yet, or you haven't listened to the interview with Amelia and Emily Nagoski on Unlocking Us, the podcast, I absolutely suggest everybody interact with that material, tell everybody you know. It's about completing the stress cycle, and it's remarkably important at any time for us to kind of come down from any kind of heightened state. It's even more important now during COVID-19. I was going to be all smooth about like shifting to the next slide.
I was going to say, is that the next?
What a segue. Even more important now during COVID-19. Okay. So working amidst COVID-19, it's no secret that a lot of us are stressed. We're living under a stressful situation in a way that we weren't before. Even if you're one of the folks who has been able to carry on with a relatively uninterrupted life, like there are some folks out there who are moving along in a way that is quite comfortable and familiar for them. There is still this impending sense around us all, and there's a constant low-lying stress that has psychological effects on us all. And if you haven't had a chance to work yet, your first day back at work, you will likely notice that you're very quick to decision fatigue. Everything feels like more of a bigger deal than it is. Like everything feels like a bigger decision. You'll find you're more tired at the end of the day. These are the natural responses to stress. So set life during COVID-19 means that we are, you're here. There are stats there for you to read, but we won't belabor the point. But the point that we do want to make with that is that there are additional stressors on the body right now. Power dynamics feel more tangible because we're already in a heightened state. Last minute changes from directors or from that coming down from above. Let's say there's some standards and practices thing that got missed by somebody. Those last minute changes, again, feel like a bigger deal because you're already in a stressed and heightened situation. So part of what we want to make sure that we communicate during this session is a reminder to be mindful of how stressful things are, to do as much pre-planning as possible, and to be kind to each other. If there is a decision to be made, can it be a conversation or a negotiation rather than this is going to happen? If it's something that has to happen, can it be approached with, this is a thing that we need to roll with now. How are ways that we can all work together to support that? Definitely people on this call have already been doing that. It's a reminder of, it is a practice that we need to support. It is a practice that we need to continue doing, especially at these challenging times.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say anything else about set life and anything that you've been experiencing
Yeah.
in the in the real world, in the world as well as in the workplace?
Yeah. So, fun quick side fact about me: I'm actually working as a contact tracer in addition to doing some remote theater and film stuff right now. So I'm quite in the thick of it these days. But so I see a lot of this in real life, not just on set, which is, you know, people are having trouble. They're tired. Everyone knows this at this point. We're tired. All of the stuff that Siobhan's saying, people can be irritable for no reason, and it's that reminder again to like take things slow if we can, have that forgiveness if we can, remember that we have those moments where we're snappy too, and remember that so much of the industry in film is like go go go. Time is so valuable, and remembering that maybe taking an extra 10 seconds to genuinely check in with someone and make sure they're okay is going to save a heck of a lot more time than just pushing through it and getting kind of this from then on.
Right, because
because they're
got so
protecting
many,
themselves.
yeah, and we have so many uncertainties right now, like just in the world as well as like on set in the workplace. There is sometimes confusion as to how the way the industry was working before the pandemic, how that aligns with what are the new protocols. And again, especially your first day back at work, there's going to be a lot of new things to think about. There may be some sensitivity to like, oh, what zone am I allowed? Am I supposed to be here? Are we too close? Am I on the right side of this plexiglass? Who am I allowed to talk to right now? Who has the extra materials? Where is the cart with the stuff? So there are a lot of questions. So reminder to, again, look at how to complete the stress cycle and research engaging your parasympathetic system. What are the opportunities for you to calm your nervous system? And how you were saying too about that, like that extra moment to just genuinely check in with people. Like, have you been drinking water? Are you taking a deep breath? Those ways that we co-regulate each other are like that. Human kindness is so valuable, especially because anyone who is like a hugger or a toucher, we don't have that anymore at the moment, but we do have those moments of like kindness and human contact.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to remember that, especially if we're not a performer and we're dealing with performers in scenes of intimacy, that's probably the highest risk that they have at work, is being those performers. You know, they're not masked, they're in super close proximity. Maybe their mouths are on other mouths, and maybe, you know, who knows what the scenario is for any particular show. And that's probably the highest stress level in terms of COVID risk that those performers are going to hit. So just remembering to give that grace there.
Yeah. And remembering too that everyone manifests stress differently. Some folks float through and they look super cool, but they're like hiding everything really well and they're pushing it all down. Some folks, as you were saying, some folks are a little bit more like hair triggered. So they kind of like hit the chandelier faster. Some folks are under, what do they call, under and over, not achievers. There's my brain forgetting words because it's a pandemic. Underactive and overactive, those aren't the words, but that's kind of the idea. So some people may be more tired. Maybe they're needing more naps. Maybe they feel more sluggish. Other folks may be like doing all the tasks. They might like being getting all the things done, trying to take on other people's work. Like they feel functional by feeling busy. These are some of the different ways that people manifest stress. So again, there's going to be a little extra grace and space when it comes to this. So with this in mind, this is part of why we want to bring this up, especially in connection with intimacy, is that some of that reaction to power dynamics might be a little bit heightened. So your intimacy coordinator is really an effective liaison for you in asserting your creative impulses, but also being mindful of boundaries that have been set. And here are some of the ways that your intimacy coordinating team can help you out.
A lot of this is stuff that we were, a lot of this is stuff that we were putting on, having that plan B, you know, just in case like there's an extra risk or someone changes their mind about their consent and their boundaries on the day. Having those plan Bs, those backup plans is so important. Making sure that extra time is there because we already know the risk is high, you know, having that extra safety meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. So alongside that, what we want to offer is that the National Society of Intimacy Professionals has created a COVID-19 prevention strategies book. It has some explicit listings in there about the intimacy coordinator, how intimacy coordinators can support, like what we're bringing along with our kits. Some of it that is specifically COVID-19 mitigation factors, what mitigation we can offer for COVID risk reduction. That's part of what we do in our breakdowns is we take a look at, well, here are some high possibility items, and then here are ways we might mitigate those and make those scenes a little bit less risky, but still really effective in the storytelling. So that is available. At the end, you'll see an email, and you can reach out to that email address and get that sent right to your inbox.
Mm-hmm. And it is a document intended for intimacy coordinator. So it's just so you, as a heads up, it's from that perspective of giving it to intimacy coordinator.
That's a good point. It's a good reminder. So how do you get back into the room? Hopefully we haven't done too much fear mongering. I've just realized that we've been talking about like it can be a little stressful. It is absolutely our intent to support you through that. So that's part of the impulse of letting you know about the Intimacy Coordinator Handbook. But remember as well that there are handbooks from ACTRA and Equity, depending on which discipline or which medium you're working in. So use those protocols from all the trusted sources. Actsafe, I believe, has references to various practices. Each province may also have specific recommendations. So set up those resources and support beforehand. Talk to everybody ahead of time about what are your protocols. It is a little bit about mindfully approaching those step by step ahead of time. Sam, anything else?
Yeah, like we've spoken a lot of, making sure you have that extra time, whether it's an extra 30 seconds or an extra safety meeting, whatever it is, to deal with both like what's going on personally and the performance. And then also that content awareness, I think, is really interesting. So is the team aware of the asks in the production, and the asks being like the thing that you're asking of your performers to do, the thing that you're asking your audience to witness.
Yeah, like what other, like what psychological stressors might that be? Is there anything about the content that feels particularly topical? For instance, there's a whole lot of social change happening now. Does your subject matter approach any of that? And would it be a good idea to have some additional psychological support along with that? And that, again, that's something your intimacy coordinator can also support you with, or if you have like a set health and wellness officer of some kind, that's a great thing to ask them to do, is to take a look at what other mental health supports are available for performers, for crew, for production, for anyone involved, so that we all have a sense of what's available to us. Check out the resources that are available through the unions if you are affiliated with any of those.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, like we've talked a lot about, like workplace protocols and how intimacy coordinators in particular can support you. And we won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but we do want to remind you that be mindful of your self-care protocols, your own self-care practices. I think practices is probably the word we're looking for here, really. What are the things that you do for you to support you? Completing the stress cycle is part of it, but what other self-care things do you need? And that includes, like, do you need to say no to a project because you know that the material is going to be disturbing for you or triggering for you? The schedule is such that you know it's going to be too much strain on you. Maybe it's going to be super challenging, and you know that you're going to need this kind of wind down at the end of the day. So performers, let's say that it's an incredibly physical role. Is there a physical wind down that you would like to involve? Crew, anybody who is holding a lot of stuff or carrying a lot of stuff, is this the opportunity to invest in a particular stretch and exercise program, for instance, something that will be really supportive for you? So take a look at those protocols. Give yourself the space to go to work and come back, especially if you're working digitally a lot. Give yourself some kind of commute practice. Are you changing your clothes to get into work clothes and leave your work? Are you, like, I know some people are doing this, they'll get dressed, go for a walk around the block, and then come back, and that's their commute. That helps your brain go, this is home time, this is work time, this is home time. That mindful shift can be really helpful. So what are those kinds of practices that you can do to really set yourself up for success and give your mind and body the time to like down regulate from the activity and the stressors that it is to be out in space? Community care. Sam, do you have like explicit thoughts on this one, or do you want me to keep going?
I just love this slide. You can keep going.
So we can continue to, speaking of intimacy's theme being to explicitly state what we haven't done before, we can continue to lean on this idea of like community care when we are working on a film, when we're working on a TV show. We are spending a lot of time with each other, and I won't go so far as to say like we are all family, but I will definitely go as far as to say we create a community, and some people you are loosely affiliated with, some people you see every day. And know that those community members can be part of your support. And it's also important to have your support pods outside of that. Like we all have that friend where you're like, I need this kind of response from somebody, so I'll call this person. Or I need someone who's going to be softer with me today, I'll call this person. Brainstorm that. Think about who it is in your life that you can call for different kinds of support. There's a beautiful image in one of the Brene Brown podcasts that talk about everyone at a feast with really long spoons. And they're so long that you can't reach your own dish. You certainly can't reach your own mouth. But what you can do is you can get a bit of food and you can feed the people around you. So in what way can you feed the people around you, knowing and trusting that those people in like turn will feed and support you? So who in your world can you reach out to support you in various ways? Because not everyone's your best friend, but certainly you've got someone in your circle who can support you in different ways. Actually, I was on a call today where we were talking about this thing that's happening where it's like every call you have starts with, so what's your stress? Like it sort of starts with this conversation about the different ways in which we are stressed. Yeah, you're laughing because you know you're experiencing it too. And then someone mentioned that they have been having these like weekly interactions that are focused on play. So is there, like a friend of mine does a Friday night Zoom karaoke party. I miss karaoke so much. So is there that kind of interaction you can set up that is centered around play and joyfulness? Where can you make space in your life for giving yourself permission to be free and joyful, and that your interaction together is based on what are ways that we can inspire each other for joy today? So why is this important? In the end, we are really talking about, it's going to sound crass when I say it this way, but getting a good product. We're talking about putting out the work and the art that we want to put out. But what that takes is supporting the people who make it. And really that's why I'm like, oh, the first bit sounds a bit crass because it feels like it's about the product, but really what it is, it's about the people who do that and the way we interact together to make that happen. Sam, you look a little bit like you're leaning forward to say something.
Yeah. I feel like this feeds, thank you, Actsafe. I feel like this feeds so much into what we're saying is we want people in the industry to stay in the industry. We want these talents. We want the performers. We want the crew, like the people who are good at their jobs, who work with us, who are talented. We want them to keep doing this. We don't want them to leave because they don't feel safe or because they're burnt out. We want them to stay. We want them to mentor the next generation of people who are going to continue this work. And this is one of the tools that we have for doing that, is reducing these burnout, reducing people dropping out because of stress and trauma-related injuries and illnesses, making this a more sustainable, I'm not going to say full sustainable industry because we all know this is a very difficult industry, but making it more sustainable, taking as many steps as we can towards making this something that people can stay in and stay in for a long time, in something that is healthy and happy, dare I say. And also lawsuits are expensive. So that's the other reason. I always think that's the funny one on why this is important. Lawsuits are expensive. We're cheaper than lawsuits.
We're cheaper than lawsuits. It's true. Like in time and energy. And if you think of it that way, then yeah, we can do so much more when we like front load and avoid those uncomfortable situations. And then in the end, of course, in a way, it's easier to be a good person. In a way, it is. It can be that much easier to be a good person, especially sustainably and in the long term. So this is the end of the scripted portion of the day. I see that we've got at least 12 questions in the Q&A. We would love to get to a lot of those. I want to leave this up for a moment so you can see the email where you can contact us for additional information, info@intimacysociety.com. All right, let us continue. Now I'm going to stop sharing screen and we can see the Q&A questions. And yes, Actsafe, Natalia, would you, how should we proceed here? Shall we just start with the Q&A questions and then go to any other raised hands that there might be?
Yeah, that would probably make the most sense.
Okay.
You want Natalie to read those for you, or how do you want to do that? Just want to run through
That'd be
them yourself?
great. It's not coming up on my computer. I can't find my
the Q&A should
my
be down.
Q&A screen.
I can see them as well.
There it is.
Natalie, you want to join us?
Would you like me to read? I can read for you.
That'd be great. Yep.
Okay. So first question will be, how does someone become an intimacy coordinator? If there is some necessary background, such as director or actor.
Right. So I see that is also the background on that is, as a scriptwriter, I like to put as much detail on sex scenes as possible. So I don't think there's any one background that's necessary to become an intimacy coordinator. There's a lot of us come from different stuff. Surely a lot of the first wave had a lot to do with fight, just because of those career similarities. But since then, a lot of people have come from many different backgrounds. So producer, actor, casting directors, sex educators, costumes, pretty much you name it, and it's been a background before. Just familiarity with the industry is kind of one of the key things to help, and an interest in helping people be safe, I think, is the other great thing.
Yeah. I mean, there are a number of education programs out there. The National Society of Intimacy Professionals is creating, in our own opinions, because we are colleagues with all these folks, the most comprehensive one that's out there. So ours is taking a little longer to fully launch as a full certification program. But in the meanwhile, we do have a number of modular resources, modular workshops that will walk you through the various parts of it. Let's move on.
All right. The next one is related to COVID. I think you covered that, but there is an extra one saying, any recommendations for kissing scenes with COVID in mind?
Yeah, so some of what the standard protocols have to do with isolation ahead of time, the number of COVID tests. If you haven't had a chance to be working on set yet, there are very often there are regimens of a certain number of COVID tests before you get on set, and then making sure that those individuals are isolating ahead of that time. So we're stacking the odds in favor of being as sure as we reasonably can be. And then in addition, I know our team in particular is doing a mouthwash protocol and a face sanitizing protocol. And so that's a series, not a series, but like a continued renewal of that. So every 45 minutes or so. Again, we can't guarantee, but it helps to clear the virus as much as we possibly can in that moment. And we have actually had instances, or we've heard of instances where there have been COVID breakouts on a set, or rather on members of a set, but it has not spread through this set, due largely in part to this COVID protocol, to this mouthwash protocol. So we're rather delighted to be able to share that. And then other things you can do is like use kiss masking. If people don't have to be touching mouths, then let's make sure that they're not. How can we choreograph and capture the scene? How can we change camera angles? How can we change focus of the camera so that we're doing as little mouth-to-mouth contact as possible, or mouth-to-anything contact as possible? Right.
How about talent that prefers improved sex scenes over working with intimacy coordinator?
So the intimacy coordinator is still necessary and advised for the coordination of all the parts of it. And this speaks a little bit to a little bit of a lack of understanding of what the intimacy coordinator does, because sometimes it is about choreographing scenes, but it does have a lot to do with talking with each other about what is consented or not. Let's say that someone, if they know if they get touched on the back of their head during the scene, that they will be triggered, and then that will shut down that scene. So surely the scene partner is not interested in shutting down production for the next half hour, 2 hour, 4 hours. So there are ways to work with a free flow of movement, still within consented boundaries. And that is better facilitated by a third party, generally speaking. So yes, we absolutely want to support every actor in their process, but we also want to make sure also that the camera gets the right shot. Especially during COVID, we don't want to have these people in contact for any longer than they need to be. Different provinces, of course, have different regulations on how long people can be in space on any given day. So we really need to maximize that time.
Yeah, and I think it also speaks to in film when we're talking about, that actor knows they have to hit their mark. They know they have to say that line at that time. When we relate it to things like that, I find it helps quite a bit in terms of, it's because of this lighting or like the camera angle is here. Actually, so it's exactly what Siobhan was saying, and then reinforcing kind of when we're looking at specific angles and stuff with cameras as well. That's another way to deal with it.
Okay, just to give some direction in some examples, can you just dissect the nudity and sex scenes and the undoing?
I haven't seen it, so I can't.
Not familiar, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, maybe if that person would like to add a little bit more detail as to what kind of information they're looking for, like a full dissection of the scene could be its own seminar. So I'd love to know with more detail what kind of thing you're interested in. But let's move on to the next question.
How do an intimacy coordinator protect or supports the talent who get aroused during the sex scenes?
Yeah, so this is a lot of where it comes into with modesty garments is that it's not just, a piece of fabric in between people often. There's other things involved to create barriers in between people as well. And what that does, it tends to decrease sensation. Another tool that we have in our belt is we talk very frankly about vascular reactions, which is what I'm going to assume we're talking about here, because they do happen. So being frank with performers, all performers involved, that vascular reactions aren't conscious. They happen sometimes, and we have everything in place to help decrease the likelihood of that happening by decreasing sensation. And then having a frank conversation about what to do if they do happen, and that might involve cutting and taking some time to cool down. It might be that no one notices except the performer who it happens to, because there is that barrier and so much fabric and decreased sensation that maybe we don't even see it. Maybe it's just something that actor feels, and if they want to stop, knowing how they can stop, having an out or something like that. Do you have anything
part of
to
that
add
is
to that?
supporting. Yeah, because I think part of that is supporting, yes, people with penises might get erections, people with vaginas might have fluids, and that doesn't make the scene better or worse. That actor is not intentionally being aroused. Emily Nagoski has a TED talk on the truth about unwanted arousal. It's quite detailed and goes into a number of different parts of that discussion, but the part I want to draw your attention to is the real thing of bodies sometimes do things that brains are not party to. Sometimes front loading with that conversation reminds people that a body responding isn't inherently related to what that person's cognitive thoughts are or their actual desires or the amount of respect they have for their scene partner and for the workplace. So some of that context can really help to support all folks in understanding what might be happening with the body, and can help to front load again some of what those conflicts, those potential conflicts might be, and then supporting people in the moments that they happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What stage of production should an intimacy coordinator be consulted or engaged? What kind of
at the beginning
work do you do?
Yeah,
So
I would say as early as possible is better. We've helped with audition. We've helped with how to word audition phrasing. Like I would say, like as early as you know you're going to need an intimacy coordinator, we can help pretty much.
And if someone is like, if someone is in a position where they are receiving scripts and they want to know more about the script before they entertain more conversations about that script, your intimacy coordinator can do those breakdowns on it and say, like, this is approximately how much time and money you're going to need on these scenes as written. This is where your standards and practices will come into play, because if it goes with this network, it'll be this. If it goes on this streaming service, this is how that action will be affected. So they can consult at many different stages. That said, it's never too late. I mean, the night before is a little too late. Is a challenge, but still doable. So if you are working on a project and you're like, oh, we're shooting this tomorrow, we need some support, your intimacy coordinator can come and support you. But for your best experience and for your production's best action, earlier is always better than later.
Okay. How do intimacy coordinator choreography almost sex with straight actors?
It's choreography. So whoever has what genitalia doesn't actually affect the performance of the action. If someone is feeling vulnerable about that scene, we can also support them in how to approach that scene and talk to them about what vulnerabilities or what challenges they're facing with performing that scene. I would say to actors as well, though, that if they know that that is a challenge that they can't undertake, that is something they should consider when they are submitting for work. If it's a challenge that they are interested in undertaking, the best thing is to come in with an open mind and to listen to what your coordinator has to say. Do your research as well to fully understand the humans that you're portraying, so you're giving a true and as accurate a portrayal as you can be. We could also divert into a discussion on representation at this point, but we won't do that at this moment. But I do want to flag that is part of what should be involved in that question. Sam, do you want to say more on that?
100%. Yeah. I'll also just add in, it's none of our business as an intimacy coordinator what the sexuality of one of our performers is. If they disclose something like that to us in the process of us getting boundaries or consent from them, again, that's not our information to share, because their sexuality doesn't actually affect their performance, and it's not really relevant unless it's something that they feel like they want to share wider or want to have a discussion about the director with. We just don't know, and if someone chooses not to share their sexuality, I don't like to assume anything, because a lot of people, they don't share and they have good reason for that. So that's just something I've found in my work.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I also, I also typed two if you click the answered in the Q&A, there's just quick little, someone asked for the email and another one asked for the name of the podcast. They're in the answered box.
Okay.
Thanks
How
for doing that.
How important do you feel it is for the director to not be the intimacy director? We're talking about theater, and it is ever okay if there is the same person, if the director will be the intimacy director as well?
We both have opinions on this, I think. It has remember that your intimacy director is never there to judge anybody's ability. So that's an important thing. The necessity of an intimacy director is that third party mediator, because the director could be the kindest person on the planet, but they still hold power in the room because they hired that person to be there. So you can't actually be sure that your actor is freely consenting, because for most people, for many people, there will be a sense of, I've got to do what the director says. So we really don't suggest, we really do recommend that there's always some kind of third-party mediator. Your intimacy director is your best bet, because your intimacy director has various protocols and supports in choreography. Sam, anything you want to add to that?
I think what you said is fantastic. I think it's also just like, it's that extra person there that's a support. So the same way that, you know, you might hire a stunt coordinator or a choreographer if there's dance, it's a different language, and it's someone who can help translate it. So if you're having trouble getting across a point of being like, I want it to look like this, we're those people that can help figure that out. And also, again, like was Sean saying, doing those boundary checks, because I know raised as an actor, like you're taught to say yes or you shouldn't be there. And
Yeah.
having an IC really does help make sure that those yeses are actually yeses. I think it's just so helpful.
And then in conjunction with what you said, that way, when you have an intimacy director, the director can then continue to have their perspective on the arc and the larger picture. The intimacy director comes in and talks about the specific details, the small adjustments that will help with the full expression of the scene. So it has a bit to do with all sorts of different ways of how it helps you to express the scene and get the work that you're looking for.
I see one quick question that I think is a very fast answer, and I know we're starting to get a little short on time, so I just want to answer it. Someone asked, how much should a project budget for an intimacy coordinator? I would say whatever level the project is, look at what stunt coordinators are charging, and it should be around the same. Right now, it's very similar. So whatever level, from indie to beyond, whatever level stunt coordinators are charging, around there.
And do also budget enough time for preparation, phone calls and liaising. It's not just the day on set, but you'll need approximately a day for all the prep work as well, a day or two.
Yeah.
Okay. Can an interested crew take courses on IC for background and general information, either or not they wanted to become
100%. Do it. I think it's one of those amazing things where, like, the more you know about the other roles that are happening around you, the better you can support those and the better you can do your own job. So if you don't want to be an IC, but you just want to know what they do, take those courses, watch the webinars, and I think that can help but make, wow, that sentence got away from me, but it would definitely like help you do your job better. Because you're probably already rocking it, and then you know what we're doing, and you're like, okay, they got that. Cool, good to know. That's why they're doing that weird thing in the corner.
And it can really help you to be a great ally too. If you see something that needs some support, you can say, oh wait, I learned this thing. You can help, you can be part of the team that supports the whole workplace. Yeah, so the National Society of Intimacy Professionals has workshops that you can often attend where you don't have a lot of those booked over the next little bit, but please feel free to add yourself to our mailing list. I've put a bit code there, and you can join up. You can come and study with us.
Fantastic.
Okay. Are there cultural ICs, or are the majority of ICs in Canada Caucasian, right? How does that come into play in the multicultural scenes?
So we do recognize, like I'm passing for white, but I am various background. We do recognize that at this moment, there are a lot of cis white women or people who present as cis white women doing this work. And that's not intentional. That is not so as to shut other people out of the work. So I want to make sure I first put out there that is that idea. Part of the initiatives for the National Society of Intimacy Professionals is to invite all peoples who are interested in doing this work, because it is important for folks to have representation. On a personal note, I definitely felt the impact of that recently, where I went, oh wow, yeah, representation matters. So I feel for the people out there who don't see themselves represented in this role, and know that at the Intimacy Society that we are with, we are definitely interested in supporting that. So how does that impact multicultural scenes? It's part of the reason why we continue to study, to endeavor to be a good ally, to or at least present ourselves as someone who might be able to be someone you can talk to, and to fully understand the scene and the what that performer might be going through and what they might want to ask for. If you are specifically interested in talking to intimacy coordinators of color, there is a company called Intimacy Coordinators and Intimacy Directors of Color. You might want to take a look at some of their information. But Sam, do you have some additional thoughts, though, on how that affects scenes of that do not have cis white women in them?
Yeah, one that it does affect it for sure. Like you were saying, it's definitely, again, like you were saying, an absence in the industry right now. I think a lot of us are here because of privilege. I know I certainly am. So it's a challenging thing, and I think it does make a difference. There are productions out there that I can think of a few off the top of my head that they would prefer to have someone of their culture for cultural safety reasons in the room with them, for lots of different reasons. You know, it might be a hair thing, it might be a modesty thing, it could be any number of reasons, and people should have the right to have someone that is of that in the room with them. I don't have an answer for it right now. I just know it's something that needs to happen and that we're working towards. But I appreciate the question being asked.
Yeah, and alongside that, I've put our email into the chat again. If you are interested in pursuing this work, if you know someone who is interested in pursuing this work, please feel free to reach out to us. If you are someone who is interested in pursuing this work and there have been barriers, please inform us. Please let us know. We are working on our end to do what we can, but we can't know the stories of everyone out there. And if you can perceive of a way that we can support you in pursuing this work, we want to be sure that you can. So we humbly ask, and we are vulnerable before you, knowing that we would like to be able to support you. So please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and I also just want to mention, there's also people doing this work, people of Indigenous communities, people of color who are doing the work of intimacy coordinators and directors who just might not necessarily have the same platform that we do. So those people are out there. They might just not have the website and the connections that we did right off the top. So like Siobhan was saying, we're trying to find them.
And alongside that, so if you are folks who have seen this or have known for a long time that you are essentially an intimacy director or coordinator, or would classify your work as being intimacy related, please also reach out to us. One of our first initiatives as a society is to create a registry of folks so that people can pursue this work, and we can support through the platform that we have been able to build. We very much want to recognize everybody who does this work. So please do reach out to us.
Okay, thank you so much.
We might finish these last two.
I know we still have two more questions, but we don't have more time. And then if people would like to text you later on, it will be the way to answer the questions. So I would like just to thank you. It was an amazing session. Thank you all of you guys.